Millionaire's pretend wedding to soothe his mother until her secret turns his life upside down. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to our main character. Rain tapped against the glass walls of coal industry's top floor, a steady rhythm echoing the storm outside. Ethan Cole stood by the window, the city lights reflecting in his dark eyes. The youngest tech millionaire in New York, he had everything except peace. Behind him, a faint voice trembled. "Mr. Cole, your mother's vitals are unstable. She keeps asking about your wedding." Ethan turned sharply. "Doctor." Rivera's face was gentle but firm. "She believes you are married, Ethan. The idea comforts her. If that illusion breaks now..." He hesitated. It could worsen her condition before surgery. Ethan's jaw clenched. For months he had lied, telling his mother he had finally settled down. It started as a white lie to make her smile during chemotherapy. But now, with her heart surgery tomorrow, that lie was about to destroy him. "I will fix it," he murmured. "She will not go into that operation afraid." He left the hospital and drove through the storm, headlights slicing through the dark. By midnight, he stopped outside a small apartment complex. The woman he needed to see lived here, Mara Jensen. She had been his mother's private nurse for 6 months, quiet, capable, and impossibly kind. She had once stayed 3 extra hours after her shift, holding his mother's hand through a panic attack. Ethan remembered that moment. The way his mother smiled again for the first time in weeks because of Mara. When Mara opened the door, she was still in scrubs, her auburn hair tied back, eyes tired from a double shift. "Mr. Cole?" she asked softly, surprised to see him at her doorstep this late. "I need your help," Ethan said, voice low but urgent. Her brow furrowed. "Is your mother okay?" "She will be," he said, pausing. "If you agree to something unusual." He stepped closer, rain dripping from his coat. "She believes I am married, Mara. Her doctors say it keeps her stable. I need someone to play that role just until after her surgery." Mara blinked. "You want me to pretend to be your wife?" "Yes. For 2 weeks. I will make sure you are compensated more than fairly." The offer hung in the air like thunder before lightning. Mara looked down, heart pounding. Her brother's hospital bills, the overdue rent, the rejection letters all flashed in her mind. "I do not know, Mr. Cole," she whispered. "That is a lot." "I am asking for your compassion," he said, his voice softer now. "You already saved her once. I am asking you to do it again." The silence stretched until Mara finally nodded, her throat tight. "For your mother?" she said quietly. Ethan exhaled, relief breaking through his rigid composure. "Thank you. We will draft a simple agreement tomorrow morning." As he turned to leave, Mara stood frozen at the door, watching the billionaire disappear into the rain. She could not explain the chill in her chest, part fear, part fate. Neither of them knew that what began as a lie for mercy would soon unravel every truth they thought they knew. The next morning, sunlight slipped through the tall glass windows of Coal Industries. Ethan sat behind his desk, the city skyline glowing behind him. He looked every bit the composed Millionaire CEO again, except for the faint shadow under his eyes. He had not slept. The thought of what he had asked Mara to do replayed in his mind like a film on loop. When the elevator chimed, Mara stepped out, wearing a pale blue blouse and clutching a worn folder against her chest. She looked nervous, but determined. Ethan stood as she entered his office. "Thank you for coming," he said, his tone softer than usual. She nodded once. "You said there would be an agreement." "Yes." He gestured to the folder on the table. "It is straightforward. The arrangement lasts 2 weeks. You will stay at my residence, appear as my wife when my mother is present, and attend a small family dinner tomorrow evening. In return, I will cover your brother's hospital bills in full." Mara's eyes flickered up, startled. "You knew?" Ethan hesitated. "My legal team checked your background for security reasons. I am sorry if that feels invasive. I just needed to know you could be trusted." She exhaled slowly. "It is fine. I have nothing to hide." "No." He handed her a pen. "You can walk away now, no questions asked." She looked at the paper, 7 clear clauses. typed in precise language. No romantic involvement, no public disclosure, no contact after the contract ended. Each rule screamed distance. But the final line caught her eye. If either party develops emotional dependency, the contract terminates immediately. Her lips parted slightly. "This last rule," she whispered. "It protects both of us," Ethan said quietly. She signed her name anyway. The sound of pen on paper echoed through the silent office like the closing of a door. Later that afternoon, Mara arrived at Ethan's penthouse. The doorman greeted her with polite surprise, and the elevator carried her up 50 stories to a place that looked more like a museum than a home. Marble floors, walls of glass, and a grand piano that had not been touched in years. Ethan was waiting by the window, sleeves rolled to his elbows, tie loosened. He turned as she entered, and for a moment, the man who commanded boardrooms looked uncertain. "Welcome home," he said simply. Mara smiled faintly. "Home is a strong word, Mr. Cole." He looked at her for a long second. "Then let us call it a place of peace, for now." That night, while she unpacked the single small suitcase she owned, Ethan passed the guest room and saw her standing by the window, staring at the city below. The reflection in the glass showed something fragile in her expression, fear, maybe, or exhaustion, but also quiet strength. Downstairs, he poured himself a drink he did not touch. The rain from the night before had stopped, but the silence felt heavier. Somewhere between duty and deception, Ethan Cole had begun something he could no longer control. And as the city lights flickered across the penthouse floor, Mara Jensen whispered to herself, 2 weeks, that is all, just 2 weeks. May. She had no idea that the lie she agreed to live would soon ask her for something far greater than money her heart. The next day came faster than either of them expected. By noon, the mansion's staff had transformed the dining hall into a garden of white roses and crystal lights. It was supposed to be a quiet family dinner, but in the world of the Coles, quiet still meant photographers outside the gate and whispers of wealth filling every corner. Mara stood in front of the mirror, her hands trembling as she adjusted the silk dress that the stylist had picked for her. It was simple, elegant, and far too expensive for someone like her. She looked nothing like the nurse she had been just 2 days ago. A soft knock came at the door. Ethan appeared, wearing a tailored black suit that framed his tall figure perfectly. His eyes swept over her once, and something in his expression softened. "You look beautiful," he said quietly. Mara's cheeks flushed. "It is the dress, not me." He gave a small smile. "It is both." For a brief second, their eyes met in the mirror. Then Ethan broke the silence, clearing his throat. "My mother is already downstairs. She has been asking for you." When they entered the dining room, the atmosphere shifted. Ethan's mother, Eleanor Cole, sat near the fireplace, her fragile frame wrapped in a pale shawl. When she saw Mara, her eyes brightened with childlike warmth. "So this is my daughter-in-law," she said, her voice thin but full of affection. "You are even lovelier than I imagined." Mara's throat tightened. She knelt beside Eleanor, taking her hand gently. "It is an honor to finally meet you, Mrs. Cole." Eleanor squeezed her fingers. "Call me Mom, dear. You have brought light back into my son's eyes." Ethan looked away, unable to speak. The words landed heavier than anyone in the room expected. Dinner was soft, laughter, old family stories, and moments that felt almost real. Eleanor talked about Ethan's childhood, the paper airplanes he used to build, the nights he refused to sleep without checking if she was safe. Mara listened, smiling, answering questions as if she had been part of those memories all along. Halfway through dessert, Eleanor placed her hand over Mara's and said, "Promise me you will stay by him. He works too hard. He forgets to live." 0. Mara hesitated, her heart twisting. "I promise," she whispered. Later that night, after the guests and nurses had left, Ethan walked his mother back to her room. She fell asleep holding Mara's hand. When Mara finally slipped away, she found Ethan standing on the balcony, looking out over the glowing city. "She smiled more tonight than she has in months," he said quietly. "You did that." Mara folded her arms, the night breeze catching her hair. "She loves you. She just needed to see that you are not alone." Ethan turned toward her, eyes unreadable. For a moment, I almost believed it myself. The silence stretched between them, heavy, electric, honest. Then Ethan stepped back, forcing a polite distance. "Good night, Mrs. Cole," he said softly. The title tasting unfamiliar but strangely comforting. Mara smiled faintly. Good night, Mr. Cole. Jose. When the doors closed, both of them stood on opposite sides of the same wall, hearts beating a rhythm neither of them dared to name. For the first time, the lie felt dangerously close to the truth. Morning sunlight spilled into the penthouse, catching on the glass walls and filling every corner with quiet gold. The house was still except for the soft clink of a coffee cup. Mara sat at the kitchen counter, dressed simply, her hair pulled back. She was flipping through a photo album Eleanor had given her the night before, pictures of Ethan as a boy, always with the same defiant spark in his eyes. Ethan entered, already in a crisp suit, his expression thoughtful. "You are up early," he said. "I could not sleep," she admitted. "Your mother is incredible. She talks about you like you are still her little boy who wanted to build rockets in the backyard." He smirked faintly, pouring himself a cup of coffee. "She always believed I could fly, even when I kept crashing." Mara smiled, then hesitated. "You love her very much." "She is all I have left," Ethan said quietly. "After my father passed, she was the only reason I came home at all." There was a pause, filled with the hum of the city below. Mara closed the album carefully. "You should eat something before the meeting," she said softly. "She wants to see you at lunch." Ethan looked at her across the marble counter. "You take care of everyone. Do you realize that? Even people who do not deserve it." The words lingered between them, heavier than he intended. Mara's eyes dropped to her hands. "It is easier to care than to ignore pain," she replied. Before Ethan could answer, his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, an assistant reminding him about the morning board meeting, and slipped the device back into his pocket. "I will be back before noon. Try not to run away with all the silverware." "Man?" Mara laughed softly, shaking her head. "Very funny, Mr. Cole." When he left, the penthouse felt too large, too silent. She walked to the balcony, looking down at the city that stretched endlessly beneath her. For a moment, she let herself imagine what it would feel like if this were real, if the warmth of last night had not been built on a lie. Hours later, Ethan returned, shoulders tense from the meeting. The board had started asking questions. The sudden marriage, the lack of records, the curiosity of investors who lived off gossip. His assistant, Lucas, had done his best to shield him, but it would not hold forever. He found Mara arranging flowers in the living room, Eleanor's favorite lilies. She turned when he entered, her expression soft. "How did it go?" "Same as always," he said shortly. "Money, mergers, meaningless talk." "You do not mean that," she said gently. "You built all this. It has to mean something." "Oh?" Ethan looked around the vast room, the art, the glass, the quiet perfection, and felt nothing but fatigue. "It should," he said, "but lately, it does not." Mara studied him quietly, then handed him a small envelope. "Your mother asked me to give you this. She said it is for when you start forgetting why you work so hard." He opened it. Inside was an old photograph, Eleanor holding a baby Ethan in her arms, both laughing. Scrawled on the back were her words, "Do not let success steal your soul, my son." Ethan stared at it for a long moment. Something fragile shifted in his chest. When he looked up, Mara was watching him. "She is right," Mara said softly. "You are allowed to be human, Ethan." He almost smiled, but instead said quietly, "Sometimes I wish you were not so good at seeing through me." She gave a small shrug. "It comes with the job." That night, as she passed his study, she heard the faint melody of the grand piano, the one that had gathered dust for years. Ethan's hands moved uncertainly across the keys, each note slow and aching. Mara stopped in the doorway, unseen, listening. For the first time, she saw not the billionaire, but a man trying to remember what it felt like to feel. The following evening, Ethan's mother insisted they attend the annual Cole Foundation Gala. It was the first public event since the marriage had been announced, and the first test of how believable their lie could appear under 1,000 watching eyes. Mara stood in front of the mirror once again, this time wearing a silver gown that shimmered under the soft lights of the dressing room. Her hands shook as she fastened the bracelet Eleanor had given her. It felt heavier than gold, it felt like expectation. Ethan appeared at the doorway in a charcoal tuxedo, the picture of control and confidence. For a second, he seemed to forget to breathe. "You look perfect," he said, and the hesitation in his voice made her heart skip. She smiled nervously. "You have an odd definition of perfect. I can barely walk in these shoes." He stepped closer, extending his arm. "Then hold on to me. That is part of the act, Mrs. Cole." Hodak. The ride to the hotel was silent, except for the hum of the engine and the distant rhythm of the city. When they arrived, flashbulbs exploded like lightning. Reporters shouted questions: when did they meet? Where was the honeymoon? What did his mother think of the wedding? Ethan answered smoothly, his hand resting lightly on the small of Mara's back, guiding her through the chaos with the precision of a man who had lived in the public eye too long. Inside, the ballroom glittered with chandeliers and chatter. Every important investor in New York seemed to be there. Mara tried to focus on breathing, on smiling, on not looking like a fraud. Ethan leaned close enough for her to hear him over the music. Just stay by my side. If anyone asks, we met through my mother's charity work. You are a nurse who volunteered at one of the hospitals we fund. That part is true, she whispered. He smiled faintly. Then it will be easy. No. But it was not easy. During dinner, one of Ethan's oldest business rivals, a slick man named Graham Reed, raised his glass and said loudly, "To Ethan Cole, who finally found a woman patient enough to marry him." The table laughed. Mara forced a polite smile, her stomach twisting. Graham leaned toward her. "Tell me, Mrs. Cole, what does a nurse talk about with a billionaire over breakfast?" Ethan's jaw tightened, but before he could answer, Mara looked straight at Graham. Her voice was calm, steady. "The same things anyone should talk about, Mr. Reed: hope, kindness." And whether the people at this table still remember what those words mean. For a moment, the entire table fell silent. Then someone chuckled softly, and the conversation shifted away. Ethan's gaze lingered on her, proud, almost moved. Later that night, after the speeches and photos were over, Ethan found her on the balcony overlooking the city. The wind tugged at her hair, and she held her shoes in her hands. "You handled him better than I ever could," Ethan said quietly. Mara smiled tiredly. "It was not that hard. I have been talking to arrogant men my whole career." He laughed, low and genuine. "I deserved that." She looked at him, the city lights reflecting in her eyes. "Your mother will be proud. Tonight, you looked like a man who truly loves his wife." He met her gaze, his expression softening. "And you looked like one who truly loves her husband." For a heartbeat, they both forgot the truth. Then Ethan stepped back, clearing his throat. "We should go. She will want to hear how it went." As they left the balcony, neither of them noticed the flash from the far end of the terrace, a reporter's camera capturing the moment their eyes met. By morning, the photograph would be everywhere, and the story of Ethan and Mara Cole, the perfect couple, would no longer belong to them. The next morning, the world had already changed. When Ethan woke, his phone was vibrating non-stop on the nightstand. News alerts, messages, and flashing notifications filled the screen. A single photo dominated every headline: him and Mara on the balcony, her hair caught in the wind, his hand half raised as if reaching for her. The billionaire's secret bride, is it true love or a cover story? He swore softly under his breath. The lie had gone public. Downstairs, Mara was already awake, standing by the massive living room window, staring at the newspaper in her hands. Her face was pale, her lips pressed tight. When Ethan entered, she looked up quickly. "I did not expect this," she said quietly. "Neither did I," Ethan replied, tossing his phone onto the table. "Someone must have leaked it." That photo was taken from the hotel balcony, probably Graham's people. Her fingers tightened around the paper. "Your company will be affected, will it not?" He gave a humorless laugh. "Investors love drama as long as it does not cost them money. But my mother," he stopped, exhaling. "She will see it." As if on cue, his phone rang again. It was the hospital, Ethan answered, voice controlled. A few seconds later, he ended the call and looked at Mara. "She is asking for both of us." She saw the picture on television. Within an hour, they were back at the hospital. Eleanor Cole was sitting up in bed, the television muted. The same photograph stared back from the screen. But her expression was not angry, it was radiant. "You two look so happy," she said softly. "I knew it would happen once you gave each other a chance." Mara's throat ached. "Mrs. Cole." "Mom," Eleanor corrected gently. "You make my son better. I can see it." Ethan stood frozen, unable to speak. The guilt twisted inside him like a blade. After Eleanor fell asleep, Mara stepped into the hallway, pressing a hand to her chest. Her heart raced too fast, too uneven. She leaned against the cool wall, waiting for the dizziness to pass. Ethan appeared beside her, concern flashing in his eyes. "You are pale," he said. "Are you all right?" "I am fine," she whispered. "Just tired." But the lie trembled on her lips. The truth, her diagnosis, the medication she skipped to stay alert for Eleanor, stayed buried in her pocket. Back at the penthouse that evening, the silence between them was heavier than ever. Ethan stood at the piano, running a hand along the edge. "She believes it," he said quietly. "She truly believes we are married." Mara sat on the couch, exhausted. "It makes her happy. That is what matters." "But what about you?" Ethan turned toward her. "You never asked for any of this. You do not owe me or her this act anymore." Mara looked up, eyes glistening. "I gave my word, Ethan, and I keep my promises." Something in the way she said his name made his heart stumble. He walked closer, stopping just a few feet away. "You do not have to prove you are good by hurting yourself." "I am not hurting," she said softly. "Not yet." For a long moment, neither spoke. The city lights flickered against the glass behind them, painting shadows across their faces. Finally, Ethan said, "Tomorrow, I want to take you somewhere. No cameras, no reporters. Just a day away from all of this." "Oh?" Mara blinked in surprise. "Why?" "Because," he said, his voice low, "I want to know who you are when you are not saving everyone else." That night, long after she went to bed, Ethan remained by the window, staring out at the skyline. Somewhere deep inside, he realized the line between contract and connection had already begun to blur, and for the first time, he did not want it to end. The next day dawned clear for the first time in weeks. The sky above Manhattan was a clean, endless blue, and the noise of the city seemed to fade as Ethan drove north, away from the towers of glass and steel. Mara sat beside him in the passenger seat, her hair tied back loosely, wearing jeans and a soft sweater instead of the elegant dresses she had grown used to. The change felt strange but freeing. She looked out the window as the skyline gave way to open fields and sunlight. "Where are we going?" she asked finally. "You will see," Ethan said, glancing at her with a small smile. After 2 hours, they pulled up beside a quiet lake surrounded by autumn trees. The air was cool, filled with the scent of pine and water. It was the same place Ethan's mother had brought him every summer when he was a boy. Mara stepped out of the car, her breath catching at the view. "It is beautiful," she whispered. Ethan nodded. "She used to call it our place of peace. I thought you should see it." "Oh." They walked along the water's edge in silence. The sound of rippling waves and rustling leaves filled the space between them. After a while, Ethan said, "You are not like anyone I have ever met, Mara." She laughed softly. "That is because you spend your life surrounded by people who want something from you." He stopped walking. "And you do not?" Her smile faded. "I wanted to help your mother, that is all." Ethan looked at her for a long moment. "You could have walked away at any time, but you stayed." Mara turned away, blinking against the sunlight. "Sometimes it is harder to leave than to stay," she said quietly. For the first time, he saw something fragile beneath her, calm, something that looked like pain. "You can tell me what is wrong," he said gently. "Whatever it is, you do not have to face it alone." Her throat tightened. She wanted to tell him the truth, that her heart was failing, that she had no idea how much time she had left. But the words refused to come. "I am fine," she said instead. "I just get tired easily." He did not believe her, but he let it go. They sat on a wooden bench by the lake, and Ethan handed her a cup of coffee from the thermos he had packed himself. The gesture surprised her. "You made this?" she asked. He smiled faintly. "Do not sound so shocked. I am capable of basic human skills." She laughed, and the sound warmed him more than the sundae. Later, as the afternoon faded into gold, Ethan said quietly, "When my mother is better, I will tell her the truth. She deserves that." Mara looked at him with wide eyes. "And what happens to us then?" He hesitated. "I do not know." She nodded slowly. "Maybe that is for the best." But as they drove back to the city, the air between them felt charged, filled with words neither dared to speak. When they reached the penthouse, the glow of their quiet day vanished instantly. Lucas, Ethan's assistant, stood waiting by the door, his face pale. "There is a problem," he said quickly. "Graham Reed got hold of a copy of the marriage contract. He is threatening to leak it to the press unless you cut him into the next investment deal." Ethan's face darkened. He would not dare. Lucas swallowed hard. "He already did, sir. The story goes live in the morning." Mara froze. Her heart began to race, not just with fear, but with the sharp ache of betrayal. The one thing that had made Eleanor happy, the illusion of family, was about to be destroyed. Ethan turned to her, his voice tight with anger and something deeper. "I will fix this. I promise you." Mara met his eyes, her own filled with sadness. "Some things cannot be fixed, Ethan. Some things only end." And in that moment, both of them knew the world they had built on a lie was about to collapse. By morning, the damage was done. Every major outlet had the story. Headlines shouted the words "contract marriage," and Ethan's name trended across every platform. The leaked documents showed the clauses, the payments, and the signatures of both parties. What had begun as an act of mercy now looked like a scandal born of deceit. Mara stood frozen in front of the television, her face drained of color. Every detail of their arrangement was displayed on the screen, stripped of its humanity. To the world, she was no longer a nurse who helped a dying woman. She was a gold digger who sold herself for a billionaire's sympathy. Ethan slammed the remote against the counter and turned off the screen. "I will find out who leaked it," he said coldly. "You already know," Mara whispered. "It was Graham Reed. You said so last night." His jaw clenched. "Then he will regret it." Before either could say more, Ethan's phone rang. "The hospital," he answered, but his face went pale almost instantly. "She collapsed?" he said quietly. "We are coming." They rushed to the hospital. The corridor smelled of antiseptic and rain-soaked air. Eleanor was unconscious when they arrived, pale and still under the fluorescent lights. The doctor met them at the door. "The stress of the media coverage triggered cardiac complications," he explained. "We are stabilizing her, but she must rest completely." Mara pressed a trembling hand to her mouth. Tears filled her eyes. "This is my fault," she whispered. Ethan turned sharply. "No, it is mine. I dragged you into this. I thought I could control everything, even fate." When Eleanor's breathing steadied, Mara sat by the bedside, brushing a loose strand of gray hair from the older woman's forehead. "Please wake up," she murmured. "He needs you more than he will ever admit." Ethan stood in the doorway, watching her, guilt twisting in his chest. Hours later, as night settled over the city, Ethan called a press conference at Cole Tower. Cameras flashed as he stepped to the podium, his expression hard but calm. "This story is true," he began, his voice steady. "Yes, a contract was signed. Yes, I asked Mara Jensen to pretend to be my wife. But what those papers do not show is why. My mother is ill, and I wanted her last days to be filled with peace, not loneliness. That decision was mine alone. If anyone deserves blame, it is me." "Oh." The reporters erupted with questions, but Ethan raised a hand. "I will not take another word against her. She is the kindest person I have ever met. And what started as an arrangement changed me." He paused, the lights glinting off his eyes. "For the first time in years, I learned what love actually feels like, and no contract could ever define that." Somewhere in the crowd, Mara stood unnoticed near the back, tears running down her cheeks. She had come to stop him, but his words left her motionless. When the conference ended, Ethan walked out through the rain, his phone buzzing with messages he ignored. Reporters shouted his name, but he kept walking until he reached the hospital again. In Eleanor's room, he found Mara packing her things. "You should not have done that," she said softly. "You just made everything worse for yourself." Ethan stepped closer. "I would do it again. You do not get to carry this alone." She looked up, her eyes shining with both love and fear. "You do not understand, Ethan. I will not be here long enough to fix anything." He frowned, confused. "What are you talking about?" Mara's hand trembled as she reached into her bag and pulled out a folded medical report. She pressed it against his chest. "That is what I have been hiding. I am sick too." The paper slipped from his fingers. Time seemed to stop. And for the first time, Ethan realized that the woman who had saved his family was the one who needed saving all along. Ethan stood frozen, the medical report trembling in his hands. The words on the page blurred together, but one line burned into his mind: advanced cardiac failure. He looked at Mara, her face pale but calm, as if she had already accepted what he could not. "How long have you known?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Months," she said softly. "Before I started working for your mother, I was supposed to have surgery, but I could not afford it. Then the hospital cut my insurance. When you offered me that contract, I thought maybe I could buy time. I never meant to lie." Ethan's throat tightened. You kept caring for her when you were the one who needed care. Mara looked away, tears glistening. Your mother gave me purpose. You gave me peace. That was enough. He reached out, taking her hands. No, it is not enough. You do not get to vanish quietly. You are going to fight, and I am going to help you. She shook her head. Ethan, no. His voice hardened with determination. You once promised my mother that you would stay by me. Now it is my turn. I am not leaving you. The next morning, Ethan called his legal team, his foundation board, and every specialist he knew. Within days, a medical grant was created, the Mara Jensen Cardiac Trust, a fund for nurses with chronic illness. At its heart, it carried her name and her story. Mara tried to protest, but Ethan only smiled. This is not charity, it is justice, for people who give everything and get forgotten. Weeks passed. Eleanor slowly recovered, and when she learned the truth, she simply held Mara's hand and said, You have given me two miracles, my son's heart and your own. The day of Mara's surgery arrived under a gray sky. Ethan sat outside the operating room, hands clasped, every second stretching into eternity. When the surgeon finally emerged, his tired smile said everything. She made it. She is going to be all right. Ethan closed his eyes, the weight of weeks lifting from his chest. Months later, when Mara was strong enough to walk again, Ethan took her back to the lake they had visited before. The air was warm, the water calm, and sunlight shimmered on the surface like glass. Mara stood by the edge, breathing deeply. You did not have to save me, she said quietly. You already gave me more than I ever asked for. Ethan stepped closer, taking something from his pocket. It was the simple gold ring from their contract ceremony, the one she had left behind in the hospital. This time, he said, his voice steady, no signatures, no conditions, no lies. Her eyes filled with tears as he knelt down. Mara Jensen, will you marry me truly, this time? She laughed through her tears. Yes, she whispered. He slipped the ring onto her finger, and the crowd of swaying trees became their only witness. Later that evening, as the sun dipped low over the water, they stood hand in hand, watching ripples spread across the lake. Mara leaned against him and whispered, Your mother will be happy. Ethan smiled. She already is. She said once that peace is not found in money or power, it is found in the people who choose to stay. The camera of memory lingered on their joined hands, the reflection of two hearts that had once lived behind lies but found truth in love. And as the light faded, Ethan's voice echoed softly. The contract ended long ago, but my heart never did.